All right. Well, thank you guys for coming. We're super excited to be here. I'm Tim Lapetino. I am moderating this panel, and today we're going to talk about Atari 26 Homebrew. And this is a subject that's kind of near and dear to my heart. But first, I just want to introduce the guys that we're talking to here. We have Garry Kitchen and John Champeau. Right. I'll let them introduce themselves a little bit more because that's some of what I want to talk to. But some of this, I want to talk just really quickly about the genesis of this panel, right? If you guys go out in the hall and you go out there, you can see all sorts of original Atari 2600, NES, and other platform homebrew games, right? That was not always the case, right? Those game publishing used to be the place where, that companies made this, and you had to make large investments in hardware, in manpower, people power, I guess. This was the domain of companies. But one of the earliest homebrew games, this was 1995, a guy named Ed Federmeyer created his own game for the Atari 2600 called Edtris. And obviously it was a Tetris game, right? And it was sold through mail order. I was younger than I am now, but I actually ordered it through the mail, and I got this thing, and it had a photocopied label on there, and I plugged it in, and it kind of blew my mind because there was somebody making a new game, pretty far after the last official Atari 2600 game, which I think was 1990. So this was a good 5 years after this console was, and this console was long obsolete. There were much better technologies, newer technologies, other game consoles. And Ed kicked something off where, people started taking it upon themselves to sort of take their interest, their programming skill, and their sort of passion for Atari and other platforms and turning it into original games. And when I was thinking about, okay, what could we do that was, something that hasn't been talked about, I wanted to sort of explore this. And the reason I have these two gentlemen here, I use that term loosely, here is because they have really, really interesting perspectives on different ends of that, both today and yesterday. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves, and then we can get into the nitty gritty.
Sure.
Garry Kitchen. I got into the business in the late 1970s. I'm old. And I was a very early Activision employee. When it was the original 4 Activision founders and maybe 50, 60 people, I went out and interviewed with them, showed them work I had done previously because I reverse engineered the Atari before I went and visited with Activision. I think when I went and visited with Activision, they didn't believe that I programmed Atari games because they pretty much knew everybody who programmed Atari games. But I said, no, I'm in New Jersey and I'm writing Atari code right now. So anyway, I went out and visited them. I showed them what I was working on, which was the home version of Donkey Kong for Coleco. And I quickly was hired. We set up an office in New Jersey. My Atari 2600 library is not vast. I did Space Jockey when I was in New Jersey before I joined Activision. I was working for a design company. I reversed engineered the Atari. It took about 6 months. With the knowledge I had, I created Space Jockey. Then I left that company. I did Donkey Kong as an independent contractor for Coleco. And then I joined Activision. I did Keystone Capers. I did Pressure Cooker. And then I left Activision with Mr. Crane. He and I had become very closely connected partners working on code, and I've worked with Mr. Crane ever since. We founded Absolute Entertainment, did a lot of games on NES, Super NES, Genesis. Then more recently, a lot of people don't know this, but in the late 90s, Dave and I started doing games online, and we created a number of large, very popular websites. Candy Stand was known for its Candy Stand games. Mini Golf is one I'm constantly getting feedback on. Nabisco World, ESPN Arcade, and we created games that were played billions of times online. And now we consult, David and I, And when we come to shows like this, people used to always come to us and say, why don't you guys do a game? You see homebrew, people doing homebrew, why don't you guys do a 2600 game? And David and I would just laugh, because it's no easier to do it now than it was to do it in 1980, and in 1980 it was really hard to do it. So one day we decided for fun we were going to do it. And we weren't going to tell anybody. So we worked 3 years, we put out Circus Convoy, we started Audacity Games, and we have other games in development which we'll talk about. And that brings me to here. And this guy is brilliant. We're going to hear about it.
Brilliant. Well, hi everyone. My name is John Champeau. I'm from Champ Games. And I'm brilliant. What else can I say?
That's it.
Panel's over, guys. Go home.
Sums it up, right? No. So anyway, so first I want to say thanks to Garry and all the people and developers that did games back in the day. So obviously, I was much younger than still am.
I think so.
So the work that these guys did have inspired me. These are my heroes. I've said that before. This is what I always wanted to do. I never ended up getting to do that for a full-time job. But what I do now is kind of fulfilling that dream of being able to make games for the 2600. So back in the 80s, I was from 14 or 15, so I think I missed my window by 5 years. But I did, certainly I was one of those kids, and when I was 9 or 10, I got the Atari 2600, and that just blew me away. I thought it was amazing. First exposure to video games. So that just set something off. I was 9 years old and said, this is what I want to do. Even though I like playing them, I wanted to make them. And that's something I started back then, even just doing basic games on the Atari 800. We got an 800, I did basic games. Back then you didn't have the internet, so you couldn't say, well, how do I do this? You had to teach yourself, or learn it, or go get some book. I saw the stack of books, how to do this, how to do that. Never really kind of figured it out, but like I said, But and then I went to college, learned C programming and assembly and stuff like that, and really got turned on to it because especially assembly language programming, the power that we have. I know it's, as Garry said, it's as difficult now as it was back then. Certainly the tools that we have, and that's what probably we'll touch upon. Certainly it's easier to do today with the tools that we have because believe it or not, I had to use punch cards before. I don't know if anyone knows what a punch card is, but
I did too.
yeah, so basically if you wanted to write a program, you had a punch card, that was the instruction you wanted to do, and you fed it into a machine one at a time, and then you waited for your job to be compiled, and then you checked out the results the next day. If it didn't do what you wanted to do, you made your change, and you did it all over again. So it was, certainly I didn't have to do that, I had to do it for, I had a class that we had to, kind of like what the old guys used to do, how they used to do it. So,
Fortran was when I did it.
yeah, exactly. So anyway, I don't want to take much time with that. So anyway, so I went to college, learned how to do kind of two things, and in the 90s, I got interested in just making conversions of old games like Pac-Man and Donkey Kong again, stuff like that. Just games I wanted to play but weren't available to play. So I just started writing DOS games. Back then I was into DOS, and wrote all the graphics routines and assembly and stuff like that. And basically made a few games, posted them on shareware, and that was kind of what I did. And then pulled back into the Atari scene back in the early 90s, the 2000s, and kind of just fell in love again with the 2600. It was something I'd completely forgotten about. I moved on to the 800 with the better graphics and stuff like that. Went to college, got to PC gaming, and then kind of took a break. And then actually my daughter was born, and a friend of mine at work said, you're going to be bored staying up at night? I got something for you. So I like Atari. He brought me an old Atari with like 50 cartridges on it. Before you knew I was playing, okay, the baby's crying, trying to play. So I really got into it. I went, this is awesome, I wonder if I can make these kind of games. And that's, as Tim said, people like Ed really opened up the doors to show what could be done. There was still not a market for it, but a passion for 2600 games. So at that point, I just decided that I went online and researched how to do these kind of things, didn't really reverse engineer anything, but all the hard work had been done for us. So,
Yep.
but certainly got into it, and then if anyone remembers Kurt Lindell, rest in peace, Kurt. He's a great guy. He's had a lot to do with, but he got me involved with the Flashback 2, writing some games for Atari actually. Asked me to do a port of Caverns of Mars and Lunar Lander and a few others, and that's kind of what got me into it. So, and that led to one, before you knew it, I had Ladybug out, and here we are. It's hard to believe it's been 20 years, but that's kind of what I've been doing. And now we have Champ Games, and we're basically using bleeding edge technology for our games. So unlike these old
Completely opposite.
Yeah, these old school guys, they do, and it's amazing what these guys can do. They do assembly language. They don't do any helper checks. They do no extra RAM, some extra ROM, but obviously they squeeze everything you can out with what you could have done back then. And just to go on the record, almost all of our games that we do now could not have been done in 1980. So I'm constantly online, not defending you guys, but definitely saying, you always get, well, why didn't they make Galaga back in 1985? It was impossible. You couldn't have done it. So that's why it wasn't done. So, but like I said, Champ Games, what we do and what we embrace is the latest technology, and mostly because I'm lazy. Because assembly language program, like you said, no matter how many years you've been doing it, it drives you insane. It's like literally, I code in my sleep. When I did my first couple games are all assembly language, and they almost drove me insane. And I went, I can't do this anymore. So the benefit with the latest technology is that you can do things like use higher level languages like C, have an ARM compiler do some of the coding for you. Eventually, you have to go to the Dark Master, which is the assembly language, and do your kernels. But it's a much better balance for me personally. So.
Do you have extra RAM? Do you have RAM?
A couple of bytes here and there. Yeah, 8K.
Oh my God!
8K extra, not 8K total.
Yeah, well, I don't even use the 128.
The 128 isn't even used.
I use that for like a calendar.
That was the worst part of the Atari, is 128 bytes of RAM. I mean, that's just clearly insanity to try to make a game use it.
Yeah, I did Ladybug and 16K, no extra RAM. And that one person that I had to make a consolidation for is that Ladybug you have an asymmetrical plate field with mirrored doors. And I did the math and went, you can't fit all the doors into the 128K. So anyway, so those are the kind of decisions you had to make back then where it's like, well, you can't make the full game, so you're gonna have to make some changes to make it work. So I do feel your pain, because my earlier games were all assembly language. I took 10 years off, and then I kind of got introduced back into it and enticed back into it really with this new technology. Because as I've said before, I'm an engineer first, and that's what I love to do, is figure out how to do things, not necessarily how to do something creative. Even though we try to be creative as best we can. You have to be creative, but not in a...
And if you haven't seen the games that he's worked on, spectacular. I mean, spectacular beyond what you could do because of the hardware assist, but obviously equally spectacular because they're in the hands of somebody who knows what they're doing, for sure. I mean, look, I couldn't do what you do because you're way more proficient in C and C+ than I would ever be.
Okay, well...
But my 6502 is
you have
second. So it really comes down to what the audience wants. Like some people just want the best game for the machine, regardless of the purity of it, we'll say.
Exactly.
When then there are others that are purists that want the best game that the 2600 can do,
or could have done. Exactly.
Could have done in its plain vanilla format.
And also to further Gary's point is that compatibility is a big deal too. So games that Gary, I don't know if your game actually runs in the Snoop 2600 plus, if anyone's heard about that. It's basically what
I went over and tried it this morning.
Did it work?
And it doesn't.
Oh, okay.
Well, because they're not
there
doing.
You go.
They're not doing the right super bank.
Yes, exactly. But they could do it.
Yes, it will. Shortly after this, it will.
My game's not absolutely.
That's too bad. That's one of my favorites.
But it's not a limitation of my game. It's a limitation of their hardware.
Right.
They're just emulating it. But they are in talks. I've talked to Al. Everyone knows, I'm sure, Al from Atari Age. He works for Atari now. And certainly they are excited, and they are motivated, and they want to make a system that maybe is an FGPA. If anyone doesn't know what that is, it's basically just a software implementation of the hardware of Atari. And if they can pull that off, then any cartridge you put in will work no matter what. So but right now, it's limitation of the ROM dumper, which is basically what it is. When you put a cartridge in, it's reading the cartridge as a ROM and then just playing it on an emulator. It does it well, so I'm not dissing it at all. I think it's wonderful for what it does, but it's limited by, every time you have a Superman cartridge with a circuits convoy, it might not work because, well, we didn't implement it.
I was excited, I got Kaboom to work on it.
Exactly. Kaboom obviously is a very old game that.
But it's also a little bit more advanced than your average Atari game, too.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely, but it's about 2K, I think?
Yeah.
2K, so that's certainly not using any extra memory, it's not using any super bank switching. Anyone doesn't know that, the Atari is limited by how much ROM you can have in memory at once, it's 4K. So basically, what they did in the 80s, they figured out how to swap in banks. So okay, it can be a 16K game, but we have 4K here, 4K there. You have to swap it in, and to do that, there's special hardware in the cartridge that does that. So if your emulator doesn't support that special hardware, it's not going to work. So, but certainly a lot of the common ones work.
Yeah.
And then things like super chips, super banking, whatever.
And good news is, after this show, I'm going to work with Atari remotely and make sure that the games that we do at Audacity work on that hardware, and it will. It just doesn't on the version they have here.
Let's back up, you guys, because I want to talk about the how.
We went on for a whole
No, it's great. This is what we're here for, right? But I also, before we talk about the how, and I think that's really important, I also want to talk about, you guys are very smart. You could do a whole bunch of things programming. Why on earth would you program for a game that was a system that was really obsolete 40 years ago? I mean, like the technology was obsolete.
Is it obsolete? I didn't know that. I'm done.
Sorry, I ruined it for everybody.
It's not obsolete.
But I mean, like technically, right? Yeah. There was much more advanced things. I mean, the 2600, even when it came out, it was already old technology. Am I right?
Yes.
Right. So I guess, and obviously, there's an obvious answer here, and there's a not obvious, because we're all sitting here talking about it.
Yeah.
But why that? I mean, you could have said, oh, you know what? I really want to try and program, more NES games, or I want to. But what is it about the 2600 that attracts you guys, but also other people? Because you're not the only ones.
Mm-hmm. Gary, I'll let you take this start. So.
Well, I agree with you. Probably what it is I've done a lot of things in my career. I've programmed a lot of systems. Most recently, I did a whole series of iPhone games. And there you're talking about great technology, great processor. I mean, just the latest iPhones are insane. They're as good as PlayStations. So I've done that. But I'm fortunate enough that I don't need to make the decision of what I'm going to work on based on who's going to pay me the most money. People are not going to pay me a lot of money to make Atari 2600 games.
I can vouch for that.
Yes. But I do it because it's my favorite platform of all time. And it was clear to Dave and I, all the shows we do, all the people we talk to, there were people who were really passionate about, we want to see what you guys can do today. And a big motivator was to just do it for the fans, do it for the people in the audience who wanted to see what we could do on that machine. And so many people had asked, and Dave and I reached the point where we said, we've got some free time. We're not going to make any money at it, but let's do it, just because it will be something that, it's kind of giving back to the community, is what it is. We're certainly not making money at it, but that's fine, because we're happy. The best part of doing Circus Convoy was it was one of the few video games I have ever done, and I've done hundreds, where I had nobody telling me there was a date when it had to be done, nobody looking over my shoulder saying, ship it next week, ship it for Christmas, ship it for this. We worked on it, Dave and I, 3 years, until we liked it. Until we said, this is really, really good. We like it. Now we're ready to ship it. And to have that creative freedom, absolutely wonderful.
Now, was that actually helpful? I mean, I know that's easy. I mean, as somebody who has to work on deadline all the time, you never like the deadline, but they are helpful.
They're helpful.
But was it hard to not have a deadline in that way?
No, because we're very self-disciplined.
Yeah.
So we knew, and the one thing we didn't want to do was announce it. I mean, we were working on it for 3 years. We'd go to shows, people say, why don't you do a 2600 game? And the night before, we'd spend 6 hours writing kernels. So, but we didn't want to tell anybody because we didn't want to set expectations. So we set the expectations when it was done, ROMs were manufactured, ready to go in boxes. Then we said, by the way, we're going to do a 2600 game. Unfortunately, that didn't happen to the same extent on our second game because we brought in my brother Dan from the outside. He joined Audacity, and he had already decided to go a different route to market the hell out of it before we ship it. And, you know, that may have backfired a little bit. But that game is still in development for anybody who asks. It is in a good place. It is not, it doesn't have enough in it to pass our muster. And Dan knows that. We're working to plus it up, and when it comes out, it will be great. But no one's telling us when we're going to ship it. That's a decision we're going to make.
That's
It's gold.
I played the pre-rule version of it, and it's actually going to be great.
Oh, it's going to be
It has
great.
potential for
Yes.
amazing.
Yes, we have shown what we have to people, and they have said, God, it's great. I wish there was more game challenge, more content, and that's what we're working on.
Right now, it's more like a rehash almost.
Yeah.
With a different format. But
Right, but don't lose confidence. It will come. And I will say we have 2 other things in development, but we're not going to say anything about when they will ever show up.
2 other games very soon. You heard that, right? He said really soon.
No promises on those.
Christmas 2020.
Yeah. Right.
So John, what about you? Like, what you talked a little bit about, you know, like this is a system that you grew up, you learned, but going back to it, you went back to it twice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, exactly why.
Did you hit your head between the first time and the second?
I'm trying to, you know,
Yeah.
there's chalk marks on my driveway for some reason, so
Yeah.
something happened, I'm not sure why. But yeah, so it's really nostalgia. So, you know, growing up playing the Atari, I had 3 brothers that were very close in age to me, so, and we loved playing the Atari. So that was just one of the memories that I hold on to dearly, and being able to, like I said, when I was 9 or 10 years old, I wanted to do that for a living. I never got to realize that dream, quote unquote. So this is kind of a way for me to do that. And definitely driven and motivated by the passion of this community, for sure, because it's not like, and nothing against iPhone games, it's not like 1 in a billion iPhone games that are being made. You know, there are a lot of amazing ones out there. But, you know, something like this gets a lot of press and attention when it happens because it is something special. It's not just another, you know, app and thrown on the phone that someone's going to, you know, play a few times, whatever, and then move on. So certainly that was one of the things. And the engineering challenge part about it is really what brought me back because, like I said before, I did DOS programming back in the day, and I made that challenging for myself in the sense where I did all the graphics routines in assembly, and then I used C for like the game logic and stuff like that. So once I got back into the Atari and I got to the assembly language, which I really enjoyed, that once I got pulled back into it and I saw I could do the game logic of C, I went, this is almost exactly what I did back in the 90s, which I'd love to do. It's just on a smaller platform. So between all that, it's just something that, you know, every year, you know, we take a different approach. We have more of the Dan Kitchen approach where we make announcements because, and me personally, we don't have a deadline. At least realistically we don't. In my mind we do. Because I don't like the headline games, and this is my personal, the way I program. Like once I start something, I want to finish it because I will nitpick at it until it's done. Like Turbo, I worked on it for 3 years, and it starts to get done. So, and I do that mainly because I want to pretend that I'm working for Atari or Activision or something like that. I went, how would they have done it? Obviously, it's not exactly like that, but that's kind of what I put myself to. So I then make an announcement. I do the kickoff where I have 90% of it done, and then this PRGE or these events really help give me a schedule. Because Al and when I used to publish with Atari games, they would, he really would only publish games like once a year. So if you miss that window, you know, you would have to wait a whole year. And that'd be another year of me bug fixing or tweaking in, you know, some game where, at least now I can, whatever's wrong with turbo and elevator agent, that's just what it is. It's going to be a feature that I don't know. If anyone asks, so. Yeah.
Of course. So
Yes.
let's talk about the how, right? So like, you know, we talked a little bit about how there are different hardware opportunities now that were not available. But let's talk about, and let's keep it in a way that I can understand it. So that means really, really simple. You know, not as technical.
Yeah.
What are the development-wise? Like, what sort of tools and things do you have today that you know that Garry did not have? You know, back in the 80s.
And probably still don't have.
You can share. You're allowed to tell them about it too.
The competition? Never. No, we're not. I was actually a beta tester for a circus convoy, so there's no bad blood between
No, not at all.
Champagne
No, it's not.
So.
You know, we honestly don't have any tools on the programming side that we didn't have. I mean, Activision had a very sophisticated development tool that was a hardware-based debugger. So when you were writing 6502, you could do real code development and real debugging. That's no better or worse than what we can do now. So on the hardware side, it's no different than the 1970s, 1980s for us. I'm writing 6502 code the same way I always did. I mean, Dave is actually working. He has a project that overlapped this weekend, that's why he didn't come. Dave has built some tools that help you write a kernel to some extent. Kernel is the part that puts the image on the screen, and the kernel is where you spend 90% of your programming. I don't even use it, the tool he did. It's good for him, I don't care about it. I eat and breathe 6502, I don't need any help there. But on the art side, we do have tools. Because making art on the 2600 is not something that an artist can help you with. It's something that it's very technical. So we made some really nice technical tools that allow us to do things like the giant snake in Convoy,
Absolutely.
which you could never do without tools we created. And it allows us to create things with many, many colors and overlapping sprites to create larger images. And that stuff you could do, but in the 80s, but it was just
Time consuming.
so unbelievably time consuming and so difficult to even wrap your
Yeah, so
mind
you
around.
basically you design the thing and then it auto generates the code for you, so you don't have to go and bang it out.
Well, to some extent, more it gives me. I did all the art on Circus Convoy. Dave writes the code, I do all the art, and then there are games where I code and do art, and he does art. That one I did all the art on, and I did that because we really wanted every piece to look amazing, to look incredible, and we knew the machine could do it, but we had to use the magnification by line, the shifting by line, all those things in such a way to build large objects. And that was really where we focused the tool. Outside of that, we don't. I'm building a new tool now for the 2600 because the one that we did for Circus Convoy was outdated. So 2 weeks ago I said, I'm building a new tool. There are certain things I want that I still can't do. So that's my time right now.
Now, do you feel like were there things also now, you know, with all this time that's gone by and seeing things that, you know, some of them are hardware things, but also other homebrew programmers are like, oh, this is how I attack this. Like, do you feel like you've learned from those things? Or do you feel like, well, I'm just doing it always the same way I was doing it before? Or do you feel like, oh, I picked that up from this person, oh, I noticed they're doing it this way?
No, I didn't. All due respect, I didn't learn anything from the homebrew people that I didn't already know. What I did learn, which is fascinating, is that when we wrote those games, we didn't have the background of all the things we've written since then. And a few months ago, without giving anything away, I had done some things on the iPhone that I really liked, certain techniques in terms of depth and perspective and things like that. And I said, I can do that on the VCS. So I wrote a demo of something on the VCS that has depth and perspective just like I did on the iPhone, but it's code I hadn't created when I was on VCS. And I was amazed how easy it went over. So now I look at things on the iPhone and I said, there's no reason why I can't do that. And no reason why I can't do that. So now I'm bringing those techniques over onto the 2600. And I have a really nice demo I did, and I showed Dave, and he was like, shit, that's pretty good for the 2600. And so I surprised myself, but I did it by using newer techniques.
Got it, right. So techniques that were born in a much more sophisticated technology.
Absolutely.
You're sort of demaking them.
Yes, and I could apply them to that crazy little machine. And the graphics may be a little blocky,
Yeah.
but the effect is great. So that'll be one of the games that comes out
Awesome.
someday in the future.
Christmas 2023.
Right.
John, what about you? Like development tools, what are the things that have helped you?
Probably the biggest thing is Stella, which is it's an emulator that runs your code on a PC or Mac.
Can you guys hear them all the way in the back?
Yes, Stella is wonderful.
Yes, exactly. So that's that, and there's also another debugger out there called Gopher. So basically what it does, it'll run your code. It's much quicker than I think what you guys had to deal with. As far as, I can make a change, hit a couple of keys, and within seconds I can see my change up on the screen, and I can stop a debugger and decide okay, what's happening exactly on this line. So it's very sophisticated. So that's probably one of the biggest tools that we use. And then
So that helps with speed, just in terms of
speed.
does it work or not?
Yeah, but also, and just identify, like, to touch upon what Gary said, I made a port of a conversion, I got it correct, it's not actually a port. It's a conversion of Galaga on 2600 a couple years ago. And to do that, what I did is actually loaded up Galaxian from 1983, which was made by Atari, and into the Stella debugger, and just saw how they were able to get all the enemies on the one line using just one player. So I used that as the inspiration. So certainly something like that I wouldn't have been able to do, or even think of. I didn't think it was possible, to be honest with you, but apparently there's some part of the trick where you can do that. Again, I don't want to get too technical about touching upon what Gary says, like something, so that was done, and then be able to rely on that to actually think about, okay, this is how this game can be done. Use, even though if you're not, like I don't personally, I learn a lot of things from other homebrew developers, but mostly just from examples that I see. And usually what I'll just do is decompile the code or run it through the debugger to find out, like how is this possible, and then use that if I need it with the kernels. Because as much as the new hardware that I use helps with game development, usually for like the game logic, in the end, there's always those kernels that you have to tackle. And those are the ones that draw the screen. No matter what you do on the outside of the kernel, that is still pure 6502 assembly. You still only have 76 cycles of.
And they're so goddamn much fun. I mean,
That's actually
they
most
really
fun.
are just.
Yeah, I spent 4 months writing the kernels for Elevated Agent just to get. It's actually check it out.
I heard it's great.
All the color changes on one line. I didn't think it was possible, and just one day I was looking for one. I needed one more cycle. I'm sure you've heard of this before. And I found it out of the blue after like 2 months. I went, I can do it. And I was just about to give up.
And that is why the 2600 is fun.
Exactly.
When you say, when I did Donkey Kong, I wrote a kernel that did a non-symmetrical playfield, single line resolution, with a guy with a playfield, with a color table, and the barrels that rolled through kernels. I had kernels, and yet I got the barrels to roll through them, which is really hard to do.
Yes, I had the same thing with Conquest.
It's horrible.
Exactly.
And then I was 80% out of the game, and I said, well, damn it, he picks up a hammer at one point, and he runs with the hammer and hits the barrels, and nothing changes in that kernel. That kernel's full. I got nothing. How do I fit in the hammer? And I figured it out. Which just shows you can always do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, just when you think you can, you can always do it. And I actually added and like 2,600 programmers, no one ever says to me, how the hell did you do the hammer? But the hammer was the hardest thing I did on that. And it's amazing you can do it. It's crazy.
How did you do it? Wasn't it the ball or something?
It was the ball and missiles, but I didn't have the cycles.
Yes.
So I don't even remember. I would have to go back and look at that
I don't know.
code, figure out where I found the cycles to put those two objects on the screen. But it was nuts. So I did it.
And Gary, we're gonna talk about this tomorrow, we have another panel, and I wanna ask about like, oh, somebody came up with some innovation or some clever way to solve a problem, like you were talking about, John. Like, what, back in the day, but even today, is that a kind of thing where you're like, hey guys, check this out, this is pretty cool for the 20 other people who are doing this as well, like, look at the way I solve this, like, do those things sort of populate in the community?
Definitely, I mean, I'm involved in the homebrew community, like Atari, or just in general, so I have a lot of developers that I work with or chat with, the developers who made Stella, you know, Tom Jens and Steve and those guys, so, yeah, so I'm constantly working with them. I actually work with them on, I actually came up with an idea to do elevator agent to get my cycles. I did cheap, by the way, because I convinced them to add a feature into one of the drivers that we use to get me those 2 extra cycles. Yeah, so basically,
I have to leave.
yeah,
I can't be here.
yeah, just so you know, so when I do an LD wire, LDX, I did it so I could get it into 3
Oh,
cycles instead of 2, and that's how I did it.
God damn, that's pretty good.
So it was a little cheap, but I'd be innovative to do that. I came up with it myself, I developed it.
Yes.
I put it into the driver. So I went, well, why can't I use it? I need it. So, so, but if you ever need it, Gary.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. You know, it's the opposite with us though, Dave and I, because we don't talk to other people about the 2600 work we do, and we've tried. It's not like we haven't tried. We've reached out to the biggest names in the industry who you want to see 2600 games from, and you know them. You know the biggest names. If you were just in this room a little while ago, you know the biggest names. And we have talked to them, and I have sat down with them at lunch with them and said, do a 6502 game for us. We'll put it out on Audacity with our beautiful packaging and all that stuff. And nobody wants to write code. Like 3, 4, 5 people with big names we've talked to and said, do it. And they say, look, you want me to write, you ain't even mind. I don't want to do that. It was horrible. It was horrible, you crazy? So we haven't been able to share the innovations with anybody because nobody wants to hear about them.
6502 is definitely a soul-sucking exercise.
You know, I love the 6502
It's
more
probably,
than anything.
it's almost like an internal battle.
It is.
really
I do love it.
Yeah.
I do love it. I'll tell you a funny story. It's a funny story. I used 6502 code for a password on the web for something I had to get access to. I said, no one will ever know this. I wrote 6502 code in my head, turned it into opcodes and made the password. And then my family had asked me, what's the password to get on Hulu? And I give it to them and they're like, what is this? And I said, it's completely clear to me. I can read it. It says load the accumulator and store it to X. And they're like, it's just ED89. What is this? So I use it for passwords. Because I know no one will ever know what it is.
You know, they have these random passwords, right? But that wouldn't be any fun.
No.
Now people are going to try to break into my bank account.
Let's see what's in the
Accumulator 25.
All right, I do want to leave some time for Q&A, but we're getting close to the end. But I do want to ask one more question for you guys. Like, so there's a lot. I mean, you know, it's 2023 now, and we're still talking about Homebrew Atari 2600. You know, Atari has just purchased Atari Age. There's potentially another avenue for putting out games. What do you guys see as the future? You know, and I'm not, you know, you don't have to disclose any proprietary information here, but like, what do you see as the future of this? You know, of putting out 2,600 games? Is it going to be the same? Do you see it as more opportunities? Do you see it as there's a potentially larger audience? Like, how do you feel about, you know, doing this little slice of putting out games? What does it look like in the next couple of years for you, for both of you guys?
Well, I would think that you are on a path that can actually grow. Because the hardware is getting better, and you're using the hardware as it gets better, and you're doing arguably games that are closer to state of the art. I don't know if our future changes at all. If we stick with the The plain vanilla classic machine, it's more a labor of love. I don't see the market for that increasing. It's the most passionate people who love the machine buy our games because we're recreating the past for them. The 4-color label, the 4-color manual, the beautiful box, even the patches that you mail away, everything's recreated. So we're like a time machine. You want to feel like it's Activision 1984, Audacity Games will give it to you. But we're not going beyond that.
Yeah, and there are games that could actually been run back there, so they can imagine that happening.
Now, will we do something else? Sure. I mean, other machines, other platforms, sure. I mean, but if we were to do something like NES or Super Nintendo, we would do it licensed with Nintendo. I would go back, I have a very close relationship with Nintendo. I would go back to Nintendo and say, look, we want to do NES games, but we want them to be licensed. Because, we want you guys involved. And so if we did something like that, I could see that being a big deal. But right now, Audacity is stuck in the 1980s. For good or bad.
Yeah, definitely for good. I mean, it's obviously Circus Convoy is something that you can't see anything better being made as far as the technology that you guys pushed into that thing with the original hardware.
Thank you, John. We appreciate it.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I'm sure you can do something amazing.
Yeah.
As far as like technically what you guys have done with that, that's probably no blood in that stone. It's probably a better way to say it. So.
Yeah, you can't go much further.
Yeah. So that's where with Champ Games, what drives me is, like I've said a few times, as an engineer, being first as an engineer, I'm driven and motivated because if anyone knows, as Garry said, this is it's almost like a hobby.
It is. It is.
Certainly, you guys are pros from the old days. For me, this is more just something I picked up because I love to do it. So this is something I just do on the side, and it's certainly growing. So it's taking up a lot more time than I ever anticipated.
What's really funny about it when you think about it? We're both thinking about how much we love it. It's like a hobby. What's funny about it is we've almost carved this sub niche away from the video game industry, which in a lot of ways, honestly, is ugly. People working 17 hours a day, 7 days a week, getting burned out, a lot of Me Too games, a lot of battles, and it's just the game industry, the core game industry, has a lot of problems, I think, in my opinion. And what we've kind of done is said, no, we don't want to participate in that.
Yeah, exactly.
We want our own little subspace here, where we're making video games, just like they are, but we're not suffering. We're doing it on our terms.
Yeah, it's like an alternate universe where
It's
none
an
of that
alternate
has happened.
Yes.
We kept it fun. So.
I mean, I've been offered jobs in the modern video game industry, and I just look at it and go, no way.
Yeah.
I'm going to be away from my family for 3 years. Come on.
Yeah.
Totally. All right, let's open it up for questions. If you guys have questions, raise your hand and I will.
I'll let you do
Yeah, so I have something to do. I mean.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely.
Let's start up front here.
For Garry. Now I know you don't use modern tools, but of everything you've learned in the last 40 years, or you've seen in the industry since you've created those first games, is there any game that maybe you or maybe even David has talked to you or your brother that you say, hey, if I could go back to this game, I would do this, knowing what I know now? Is there anything you would recreate or in the past?
Sure. I mean, and that's really what's happening with that tech demo I did a while back that I really liked a lot, which amazed me because I didn't think you could do it on 2600. Is yes, there's a lot of that. I look back on the oldest games and say, damn, I could have done them so much better if I had developed the code that I developed. Really, it's code I developed on the NES and the Super NES, because they were 65 but do also. And we really pushed the envelope on doing, perspective and 3D stuff and movement and motion and large environments. And we never did that in 2600, but there's no reason you can't because of the 6502.
Would you ever go back I
Maybe.
know there's
Well,
IP
not do the
concerns,
exact same game, because we don't have the rights to most of our
Right.
games, but would I go back to the genre? Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I would go back to the genre in a second.
Good question. What, another question over there.
So you guys, you make actual cartridges, right?
Are we crazy or what? Yes, we actually make actual cartridges.
How do you, source, how does that work? How do
Well,
you source the parts?
it's funny, for years, I mean, honestly, from like the 1990s to 3 years ago, we would always say, it's impossible to make guitar cartridges. It's possible. Can't do it. It's possible. Because what they have to do is they go out and buy old cartridges, rip them apart, use the plastic. You can't do it. There's no plastic. There's no tool. In plastics, when you make plastics, it's a process called injection molding. And plastic is a liquid, and it gets squirted into these cavities in steel, and then it hardens. And now you have your whatever it is, your widget, whatever it is. But to do that, you have to make a piece of steel that is carved to the shape of you want the plastic. What that is called is a tool. And tools are very hard to make, very expensive.
Yeah.
And we always, for 20-something years, we said, you can't do it, you don't have the tool. We need the tool. The tool was always the answer, you don't have the tool. We made a goddamn tool. One day we just looked at each other and said, what are we agonizing over this for? So we went to China and we made a plastics tool for an Atari 2600 cartridge. And we convinced ourselves for all these years it was a barrier. It wasn't, we just did it. So we have a tool.
In the back.
Yeah, I've got a question about, so are you guys using EEPROMs, or, you don't really have fab access to?
No, you can still buy ROMs. And there are electrically programmable ROMs that are not EEPROMs. And but you can't buy them in 4K or 8K.
Right.
So when people say to us, well, you did 128K, you slob, why did you use so much memory? Well, the answer is it's all you can buy. You can't buy anything better than that.
Okay, one more question, right here.
Hi, I came as my first Portland Retro Expo last year and was at the Atari Age booth, and I saw your game Turbo at the time, and I was just absolutely floored by what the Atari 2600 could do, so much that I ended up buying a 7800 just to order some, homebrew games and that, so that got me back into that. Since how exactly did you come around to being able to do Turbo with the different morning, noon, and night, day cycles and all the different environments and such for such a limited, system?
Yeah, well, certainly we cheat, that's what we do. So.
I mean, think about me. I'm celibate. I took an oath to not use that hardware.
This is a family show.
I come and I see a game you did, like the Gallagher game.
Yeah.
I look at it, I go home at night and I cry. I'll never be able to do that in a place.
Yeah, exactly.
It really tears my heart out.
Luckily, I sold my soul a long time. So.
For fame and fortune, this is all your fault, everybody.
Yes, and Turbo was, we've been working on it for 3 years, and we actually use Nathan Strum, who does the graphics for all my games. We actually use Adobe Premiere and After Effects and all these things. Well, I'm not exactly sure all the things that he did. But basically it generates all these scenes where we're alternating colors. The resolution is really bad on the Atari for that, and you only have one color per line. But by color mixing and stuff like that, and by using these tools, it generates all this data that I wrote some tools for that converts it into 2600 code. That's basically all we did, and we use a very large ROM, not as large as these guys. No kidding, we're actually 120K, but to his point, we could only get, we have a guy.
You can only get
256, so we're using 120K, so that's how we did that.
I don't take anything away from what John did, because what he just described is incredibly high-tech and hard to do.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's magic. He does rely on a crutch of hardware, we all know that. But it is magic. What he does is magic. And that's why I started by saying what he does is brilliant.
Yeah, and that's, to his point, is that no matter what you're doing outside, eventually you have to face your dark master, which is your 6
That's-
by
that's
10
six
and
above
kernels.
it.
No matter what you do, how much hardware you throw in this, memory, RAM, eventually you have 76 cycles,
Yeah.
two player sprites, low resolution play field, and a couple ball and a couple missiles, and that's
Yeah,
it. And
that's it.
that's all you have. So and that's what keeps you from it, because it's not just writing these huge games using unlimited resources. Eventually, you have to squeeze it through the small pipe if you want to run it.
And that's the challenge,
Yeah.
and that's why you do it.
That's
It's
right.
very
That's what
challenging.
keeps you going. So.
Awesome.
That's how
Well,
it
that's a great place
Yeah,
to stop.
yeah,
So
right.
Yeah.
thank you guys so much.
Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and to the right are a few more videos from the Portland Retro Gaming Expo 2023. Thanks for watching.